So basically, Necroscope, the book, takes place in the Cold War, and the main dynamic is between the UK and the Soviet Union. And basically, in this world, there are people with ESP abilities, kind of like real life, where some people are telepaths, some people are psychic, some people can predict the future, some people can, see locations from very far away. Some people can even detect nuclear energy, and they're used to, like, find out where nuclear subs are. There are people with the evil eye. They can just stare at people and give people heart attacks. There are just people with all these fantastical abilities, and most countries in this world don't really, believe it, like the United States. They don't care. They're like, they have their own little ESP group, but it's just entertainment, It's not really anything that they think is a practical application, right? So in this world, MK Ultra is not a thing. But basically there's like you got your stereotypical, 007 organization in the UK, where basically you have, a small British E branch, as they call it, that, has all these secret agents that basically have their own special little abilities. But it's not really, they don't really do anything, important, so to speak, and they're underfunded, and just, it's kind of, sort of, an embarrassment, really. I mean, they live under a democratic society, so it's all about individuality, freedom, and all that, and there's really no higher goal, anything that means more than one's own individuality. So their organization isn't really used for much. I mean, they, do secret agent work, but it's not really anything significant. And then you have the Russian E branch, where they basically, have mostly a monopoly. They have basically a guy named Gregor Borowitz, who's like a ex-Soviet general who's in charge of the paranormal espionage division in the Soviet Union, and he has a lot of the same people that the British E branch has, and he basically uses them to, spy on other nations, get information. Is actually, at least, despite communism kind of being fucking stupid, he's at least using them for something. He's honing their talents, their capabilities, and is trying to, prove to the party leader and, just the Soviet Union that this could be the next big military division, that this can be the next, big, breakthrough in science and innovation, and that it could be used to spread the motherland, so to speak, to allow Soviet world domination and the spreading of communism, right? So it's very pulpy. It's very stereotypical in many ways, and that's kind of on purpose. I mean, it's kind of the nature of the book. The book itself is written very, very pulpy, kind of like roll your eyes a little bit at some of it. And but here's the thing: I have really severe ADHD, so I love to read. I love to read. It's my favorite thing to do. Problem is, I have the attention span of a goldfish, so if I'm reading a book that I really like, it could take me up to a year to finish it, not because I'm retarded. I mean, I've been reading college grade, textbooks since I was a kid, but the thing is, like, it's so hard for me to stay focused. So when I say that, this is easy to read and so engaging, and that, I even shocked some of my friends because, they know me. They know that it takes a long time for me to get through a book, right? So the fact that I just couldn't put this book down and I just kept reading it almost like it was an obsession shocked some people I know, and made them kind of impressed. They were like, all right, for you, that's pretty unheard of. But, I mean, in the beginning of the book, you have Alec Kyle, who's, basically, is a secret agent. He's has like the ability to see the future and stuff, and basically, an apparition just shows up, and it's the interesting thing. when I read books like this, it always, it always beats around the bush, and it takes a long time for them to fucking get to the point. So immediately the supernatural cool stuff happens during the first few pages. This apparition pops up while he's sitting in his office smoking, and basically kind of debriefs him and tells him about, most of the book. So it gets right into the story. It gets into what it's actually about very quickly, and it's very consistent. But it's not so immediate that it spoils everything in the book, right? There's still plot twist and like things towards the end where you're like, aha. And some things are kind of corny and very predictable due to the nature of the book itself, where you're like, yeah, no, I saw that coming. But there's a few moments where I'm like, holy shit. And I had to go back towards the beginning and reread some of it. I'm like, wow, that's smart. That's like, there was just like so many twists and turns, and it is action packed. It is not slow. The way the story kind of works is when it hones in and talks about a certain character in some part of their life. When things start to get more tame, it switches to the other character and that portion of their life, and you kind of go skip years of someone's life and only go to the things that are very important and the things that are very engaging. So I mean, it's just, and it's graphic. It is violent. It is violent, and sometimes violent for the sake of it. Like, this is something that was meant to be read by a young adult back in 1985. I mean, or even a small boy. Basically, it's just gory for the sake of it. And, at some point I thought, wow, okay, is this going to ruin the story? Is this, just this throwing the gore in there for the sake of gore and blood and guts? Is that just gonna, is this going to, take over? But no, like, the story is very potent to where you still enjoy the story and you still get engaged and invested in the world and the people about it. And and the goriness is just like an add-on. It doesn't take away from any of it, which I was pleasantly surprised, because usually it doesn't work that way. And it kind of gets pornographic for the sake of it. It gets very erotic in certain parts, where Harry is watching his teachers have sex or whatever without them knowing, and just weird types of perverted stuff like that, or Giussani being molested by his aunt, and that's why he has sexual frustration and confidence issues. But, there's just, like, a lot of, like, it gets very sexually explicit, and as someone who's, like, against pornography and just porn culture, it's something where this is, like, a genuine exception. This is highly recommended reading material. I would recommend this to my younger cousin. Like, it's really good. And, so basically the vampire itself isn't even the main part of the story. It's building up the two main characters, a kid named Harry Keogh, who is the Necroscope, and a guy named Boris Giussani, who is a necromancer. Now, the irony is that Harry Keogh is kind of depicted as the protagonist of the story, but he's actually the villain. And the hero of the story is Boris Giussani. Let me explain. So basically, Harry is a necroscope. Basically, in this world, when you die, there's no afterlife. There's no heaven. There's no hell. When you die, you're kind of, your mind is where your body is buried, and you're kind of stuck there for all of eternity. And you kind of just think thoughts and just think to yourself, and you're alone. It's like solitary confinement. And there's just your mind, there's just your thoughts, and you just think alone. And this can be good, and this can be kind of bad, because basically if you're like a serial killer or a sadist, you start to get consumed by your horrible, evil, decrepit thoughts, and you basically create your own hell, your own torment, your own Tartarus, right? And then for people that lived a really good, pleasant, wholesome life, and they're just stuck with their mind for all of eternity alone, they kind of just relive their best memories and kind of just find peace and acceptance, so to speak. And then for like scientists, you know, mathematicians, physicists, you know, book authors, poets, you know, they kind of just take the time to explore their craft even further, you know, basically having an unlimited amount of time and a full ability to, you know, express their passions and complete works that they couldn't complete in life, you know, creating novels that the living will never come to know or appreciate, or scientists coming up with equations for thousands of years till they've reached a level of scientific understanding that could literally bring humanity to space age civilization, and they're kind of just stuck there in their thoughts in their grave and with no one to talk to. And Harry Keogh, this young boy in the story, basically he has the ability to connect with the minds of these people, talk to them. And, you know, initially it starts off innocent enough where, you know, he's kind of, you know, an outcast, doesn't really talk to anyone he knows in real life, you know, besides, you know, his love interest and his one friend. But most of the time he kind of just, what people think is him daydreaming and drifting off and not really fully being there. He's just talking to his friends, you know. And the dead not having anyone to talk to, suddenly this kid just shows up, and they're like, wow, okay, finally, I can talk to someone. Can you imagine being in the ground with just your thoughts for hundreds of years, no one to talk to, and then this kid shows up, and he just wants to be your friend? The dead love Harry. They love Harry Keogh. And, you know, with this comes, you know, what makes him the villain of the story. Basically, you know, the kid not only is able to communicate with these people and form relationships, you know, on the positive end, the dead are also able to talk to each other through Harry, almost like Harry's the undead internet, so to speak. And here's where it kind of gets a little dark. Basically, these people, you know, with all their useful knowledge, they can impart it to Harry. They can give him thousands of lifetimes worth of knowledge in just mere moments. And, you know, where it gets kind of dark, what makes Harry kind of an asshole and an abysmal human being is, like, there's a scene in the book where, you know, he's basically, you know, this kid that sucks in school, doesn't care about his schoolwork, doesn't care about getting good grades or having a good career, and he's constantly drifting off in math class. And, you know, suddenly his teacher, Hannah, fucking, you know, yells at him and fucking, you know, gives him extra homework, or, you know, asks, like, what was the equation about? And, you know, he gives them this big equation, and he's sitting in the cemetery where Hannah's father is buried, and his father is a math prodigy, and he's had more time in death to perfect his mathematics and his mathematical equations. And he's more skilled than his son. And Harry just absorbs his, you know, Hannah's father's information, and then kind of gaslights and bullies Hannah or whatever, being like, I'll show you a math equation that you've never seen before. And basically, he goes from being this kid to a prodigy, and all his teachers are like, wow, you know, this kid knows a lot. He's a hidden potential, and he's just super good suddenly. And he becomes the teacher's pet, and, you know, he just takes from the dead all this knowledge, doesn't give them any credit, he just attributes it to himself, and he becomes prideful, he becomes arrogant, he becomes kind of just, in my opinion, a monster. He becomes a narcissist, really. And, you know, there's this good scene in the book where, you know, the school kids are bullying him, being like, oh, when did you become the fucking math whiz? When did you become this genius, right? And they start bullying him. Of course, like Neo from the Matrix, fucking downloads fucking kung fu from his dead teacher, and then beats the shit out of this kid, or whatever. And you know, what annoys me the most about Harry Keogh is his superpower isn't talking to the dead. His superpower is plot armor. He basically, if he doesn't know how to unfuck himself and get himself out of a really bad situation, well, he just, you know, talks to some dead guy who has that knowledge. Takes it from the dead guy because the dead guy's lonely. And, you know, of course the dead love Harry because he's the only one they can talk to or whatever. So it's not like they get a choice and variety of living people they can talk to. They're left with this one kid, so they have to like him. They don't really get much choice in the matter. I mean, this is their only opportunity. So when he starts to become an asshole, of course, they're still going to like him. But he, like later in the books, becomes like a very famous author and starts publishing novels, poetry from these people that lived centuries ago, and basically takes the works that the dead have perfected in their minds and basically, plagiarizes everything, his skills, his life, everything that, he becomes this famous, rich, wealthy kid. He basically just fucking takes it from the dead, doesn't give them any credit, and just fucking, he's a narcissist. He's an asshole, and he's kind of set up by Brian Lumley as the protagonist of the story, but he's really the villain. He's a self-centered narcissist with no sense of higher meaning, and he basically, just fucking takes information that isn't his own, and thinks that it's his own, and then, basically buys his way through life. And kind of develops a god complex, and he becomes kind of detached at some point in the book where, you could almost sympathize with him, and then he just becomes like Dexter. He becomes cold and ruthless and just dead inside. It's like he's no longer human. Actually, quick editor's note. He reminds me of Kira. He reminds me of Light Yagami from Death Note. Starts off with this ability to, kill pedophiles, criminals, all that stuff. And then, halfway through the series, he basically starts a cult. People are literally worshiping him. And it's like, oh, someone's kind of a nuisance, just writes them into the Death Note. And it's just like, they're pretty much the same character. I mean, you got like you got a young kind of emo introverted teen with really no life skills, and then they're given this godly power, and they gain abilities that come from an outside source. And just in the end, they prove to be mediocre. They're not a god. They're just a regular human being that's just protected by, well, protected by God, protected by the author of the story. Basically, it's it reminds me sort of Roland Dischain from The Dark Tower, and I can't remember. Is it the Wolves of Cadia? No, it's or is it the Wizard and the Hourglass? I don't remember. There's one book later in the Dark Tower series where Roland basically, comes across Stephen King himself, or whatever, who's like the god of his own literary universe. And, Stephen King basically kind of gives him useful information, to continue his story or whatever, because if it was just himself, his story would end, because he's kind of just a mediocre individual with nothing going for him. So, I mean, it takes the book author to basically put him in creative mode to just give him cheat codes, right? It's his ability is just being diluted. There's character development, yeah, but like. It's stupid. He's basically Light Yagami. So, he's set up as the good guy, but he isn't. He is the villain of the story. He is someone that has a power that he just does not deserve. And this goes into the other guy, Boris Drasani, who's basically, a Romanian or Wallachian necromancer. Basically, this, without spoiling much of how he got his necromantic powers, he, basically has the ability to torture domestic terrorists. Basically, he works for the Soviet Union in the Russian espionage, or paranormal espionage division, the Russian E branch, and he can basically, get really evil people that threaten the security of his nation And basically, this is where the excessive gore comes in. In this book, in this world, basically the dead can feel their bodies getting tortured. And I know it sounds kind of pulpy and corny, but it's kind of cool. Basically, he can get a rotting, bloated body, and of course, because you have to add just extra, obscenity to it, he basically gets fully naked and then fucking slathers himself with rotted blood, rips out the organs, starts fucking sniffing them, breaks the bone marrow, and fucking reaches inside the cavity, pulls out the organs, starts fucking throwing them across the room, making some of the Russian officers sick and vomiting. And just, like I said, it gets obscene just for the sake of being obscene. But he's able to torture the information out of war criminals and basically gain their secrets, so he can learn who planned on assassinating who's a traitor here, who's a traitor there, who stole the cookie out of the cookie jar, so to speak. And he basically has an ability that's not as basically as OP as Harry Keogh, but it's balanced. Oh, it's balanced. He's not protected by plot armor. He actually has to work for what he gets. And basically, he's not even loyal to the Soviet Union. He hates the Soviet Union because they took over Romania, turned it into a Soviet bloc country. His country has been taken over so many times, it's ridiculous, whether that was the Hungarians or the Turks or the Soviets. And he sees the Soviet symbol as the same as the crescent moon on the Turkish flag, and he hates them. He thinks of them as the Ottoman Empire. He just wants his homeland back. And he's descended from a line of gypsies that can be dated back all the way to Wallachia. And you kind of learn through his own character development that he doesn't care about himself. He cares about his people. He cares about his community. He cares about his nation. And he's basically a Wallachian nationalist. Sure, the blood of the Turks and the Hungarians and these foreign invaders, some of it flows through his blood, but he is first and foremost a Wallachian and a Romanian second. And, he discovers the vampire who's just kind of dead and rotting in the ground, but like the rest of the dead in this world, they have the ability to, communicate. But, well, the necromancer can only really communicate through torturing, but that's not the point. He has the ability to talk to this vampire. And, there's a dynamic where basically he's, plotting to extract the information from this vampire by bribing it, by talking to it, with no intention of ever releasing it into the world or anything like that. But he's playing a dangerous game because he's not fully aware of what the Wampari is and the existential threat it poses. But, he basically, whenever he is at his own leisure, will travel to Romania and he'll fucking, drip the blood of chickens over the grave or whatever to feed the creature. And he basically tries to, pry information out of this vile creature and kind of annoys it to death, even though it's already dead. I mean that figuratively. He doesn't literally kill it, but he just constantly annoys it and basically makes false promises. But to his credit, it's a fucking vampire. But basically his whole logic, his whole goal is to gain the secrets, the magics, the supernatural power of the vampire and use it as a regular mortal human being to basically take over the Soviet E branch and to basically puppet the USSR and gain control over, Romania and reestablish the state of Wallachia. I mean, that's his main aim. Whether he, succeeds in that or not is actually, that's something to be left for when you read the book. I'm not going to give that spoiler away, but, his goals, despite how ruthless he can be, is for many other people other than himself, unlike Harry Keogh. So he's selfless. He's on a mission. He's on a mission to make humanity better. He's on a mission to build a better world. He's on a mission to reclaim the stolen honor of his homeland. And then Harry Keogh is kind of just, this asshole protected by plot armor, which is kind of annoying. So basically, the book just centers around these two and their development and then their eventual conflict. Now, who takes care of who is someone will die. I'm not going to say which, but, basically, these two go at it, and this towards the later part of the book, but basically, it just centers around building these two up like they're fucking titans, and having them eventually clash, or maybe not even a titan, sets Harry Keo up like he's a titan, like a story of David and Goliath, but, it's pretty interesting. In like the vampire itself, its consciousness is manipulative. It's way more advanced than average human consciousness. And what I love about this book is, even though the vampire itself doesn't really play a major role in the book, its consciousness itself is enough to pose an existential cosmic horror threat to humanity. And it's truly grisly and just horrifying. The fact that the vampire itself is removed from the book, but its consciousness is set up to basically threaten humanity's existence. So yeah, it is very interesting. And I think the second book, they actually introduce the physical vampires and get into, the morphology and, the threat they pose to humanity. And I think the third book, actually shows the origins, where they come from and all that, which, that went right over my head because I haven't read that. But I have the 3 books. Now, I just love the first book, but I heard that the second book is not as good as the first one, but I heard the third one is the best in the trilogy. That the first book's good, that the second book isn't as good as the first, but the third one is the best. And I'm excited. I'm really excited. I hear that the second book does have a lot going for it, and that it is worth reading. I hope I can get through it. But yeah, no, this is definitely like one of the best books I have ever read in my entire life. And even if it's a book I usually really, really like, I'll give it like an 8 out of 10 or a 7 out of 10. Or even a 9 at most. But this is the one book I've come across where I would just give it a 10 out of 10 and just say it is worth reading. You need to read this book if you're interested in that kind of thing. It's one of the best books I've ever it's the best book I have ever read, and it's just so engaging and it's just so worthwhile. I can't recommend it enough. Anyways, have a good night.